And we are live. Good morning, everyone. It is Friday, September 30th, 2022. And today we're talking about iPhone 14 Pro having a battery life problem, which I actually have some thoughts on that since I've been using my Pro a lot recently. The October event, is it even happening? Now it seems like maybe not, but we'll get into that. And also, we're going to react to somebody testing out crash detection on the iPhone 14 in a sort of interesting way. Because this is the iMore show, and I am always at as always, I am your host, Luke Filipovich, writer for iMore, and I am joined today by our awesome co-host, Karen Freeman, iMore contributor. How are you doing, Karen?
I'm doing well. How about you?
Not too bad. I apologize if my voice is just a bit hoarse for you all. I was at a concert 2 days ago, and I was hooting and hollering. Yeah, it was probably, I haven't been to a concert since like pre-COVID, so it's been a while, and I think maybe I went a little too intense. But I got water, I got some coffee. I think I'll be okay. But yeah, it's hopefully it's not too hoarse on your end. Yeah, let's get into this because it's kind of fun. So crash detection, obviously, we've talked about it, and if you read the reviews on iMore, the iPhone 14 and the iPhone 14 Pro, we kind of talk about how like there's not really a way we're going to test it. We're not really going to put it to a test. We're just going to kind of trust that it's a thing that exists. However, a YouTuber by the name of, I just had this and now I lost it. Luke Miani, I believe is how you pronounce it. He has a video up where he tested out crash detection. And they took a junker car and they rolled it down a hill and they like kind of crashed it into some cars and some other things.
It
And
takes several junker cars.
yeah, and it never went off.
Yeah, but they were doing very low speed tests. The basic idea was they just were kind of letting it roll down a hill, like letting the cars roll down a hill, where the crash detection is really designed specifically for high speed crashes because Apple doesn't want it to go off if you get in a fender bender.
Exactly. That's why I thought this test was it's a pretty funny video. It's actually really entertaining, but that's what I think this proves probably more without a doubt is the fact that like I don't think you have to worry about this accidentally going off if you drop your phone or you fall or something like that. Like I think it really does count on the speed. I think it has to be at a fairly high speed. So I think like the accelerometer, especially since it's a new one and they have a G-force measurement as well, which like you're just not going to get as many G's if you don't come to a complete sudden stop. So yeah, I think that's the best part about this video is like you may think, oh wow, it didn't go off at all, but if you look at the crashes, go watch the video. It's on our website. You can see it, it's pretty mild crashes, I would say. Like these aren't crashes that people would probably walk away too hurt from, I would assume. Although in classic YouTube fashion, the thumbnail's a bit like a little clickbaity dramatic, I guess, if you want to call it that, but it's still an entertaining video. Spoiler alert, it doesn't go off, but really I think what I liked most about it, like I said, is just like I've been wondering about like the false positive, I guess you want to call it that. The like accidental triggers, I think, was always my like concern about a feature like this, because you don't want it going off when you're just walking around or if you drop your phone off your coffee table or something like that. And I think, that hasn't happened to me yet. Not that I've dropped my phone, but yeah. So I'm assuming that we're probably fine. It looks like it really, really does rely on like the accelerometer to know how fast you're going and the G-force measurements to kind of like know exactly how abrupt your stop is, how many G's are getting put into the iPhone itself. So I don't think we have to.
We don't want to take this as a scientific study, though. This is a video for entertainment, and watch it. It's interesting, but it's not a scientific study.
But if you want to see some people put crash, and there's other videos out there too. I'm sure you can go on YouTube, and there's probably tons of people. I'm sure there's people who have actually like put it into its paces at high speeds and actually made it go off and stuff, because that's what people like to do. Some people have the money and the time and the inclination to buy cars and crash them into each other.
Yes, and we are not recommending that anyone try this at home.
Yes, please don't. Crash detection is something that you're never actually supposed to use. It's just a safety feature that's there. But yeah, interesting video if you want to check that out. Let's get into some of the more juicy news of the week. So you no longer need an M1 iPad to use Stage Manager, which, remember how when Stage Manager, when this first came out, and its Stage Manager has had a bit of a rocky road since it's come out in the iOS or the iPad OS rather, 16 beta. As you know, when it was first launched, the new multitasking feature of the iPad was strictly exclusively for M1 iPads, which meant the iPad Pro from last year and the iPad Air from the iPad Air 5. And that was it. Those were like the only ones I could use it. Now it seems that in the latest iPad OS beta, Apple has introduced Stage Manager into some older iPad Pros. So it's not too many models, but it's
2018 and 2020.
Yeah.
But it's very limited. My guess, I haven't tried it. I do have the 2018 iPad Pro, but I don't have the beta on it. So I haven't tested it out. But I would imagine it's not going to work quite as smoothly because it doesn't have that M1 power, and it definitely does not have the ability to utilize a second screen. So it is very limited. It's all going to be just on the iPad screen. So it's, kind of temper your excitement a little bit if you're excited about that, because it's not like the full Stage Manager experience.
Yeah. Well, and on top of that, as part of this news too, Apple also mentioned that using external display support, even on the M1 iPads where it's technically there, is actually going to be delayed and won't be coming in iPad OS when it launches sometime, I guess next month still. We have one more day in October. So that's, if you've tried Stage Manager on M1 iPad Pro, it's had a bit of a rocky go. Especially if you use it with external display, it has a lot of kind of bugs, and it's not, at least in my experience, and from what I can understand quite a bit of other people's experience, like it's not been great. It's not really been a great experience trying to use it on a monitor. So I think Apple's realized that now. I think they're going to pull it back, and they're like, hey, we need to work on this more. We're going to hold this part of the feature back, but like regular Stage Manager using, on your iPad screen is going to be available on the M1s, and also the as Karen mentioned, the 2018 and 2020 iPad Pro models, which carry the A12X and the A12Z chips, if that helps if your iPad is compatible. So if you've been interested about Stage Manager, I think like it definitely has its applications. It's definitely a bit of a better multitasking like feature than we've had before. I don't think it's quite the ace in the hole that a lot of people want, or at least a lot of people who have been, clamoring for this kind of multitasking on iPad. I don't think it's quite there yet, but it is a first attempt at sort of bringing that to the iPad, and we never know exactly what will happen. And I think, there's still always going to be people who think iPad should just run Mac OS. And I don't think that's going to happen. That's just my prediction, but who knows? I don't think that's going to happen at least anytime soon. So, if you are one of those people, I apologize. I wish Apple, had a device for you that you think would work. That isn't just, a laptop. I understand that there are some differences. But yeah, I think Stage Manager overall is neat. I've enjoyed kind of using it when I am specifically, certain tasks that I find it's helpful for me. Like if I'm writing an article and also like doing some research, it's nice to have Stage Manager kind of available to me and stuff like that. But it hasn't really quite been that like ace in the hole that I think a lot of people sort of expected. But I also, for all the flack that Apple has gotten about gatekeeping the feature to the M1 iPad Pros, I think like at least they're kind of listening and trying to bring it to even if it's not fully supported, they're trying to bring it across at least to a few more people. And I think especially, like an iPad Pro, like we'd said this before when this was first announced, but like an iPad Pro isn't something you're supposed to buy every year, right? Like it's supposed to last you quite a long time. So if you bought one in 2020 and you were probably expecting that it would carry all the new features for quite a while. So I understand the frustration of Apple having not brought it down originally down the lineup. So
Right.
yeah, I think overall it's good. I think Stage Manager, I think some people will find it really, really useful. I think some people might not find it that useful. It just kind of depends on your use case. But yeah, they're gonna delay the part with the external display. So remember that if you have been using that, if maybe it's been successful for you or you've liked it, that is not going to be in the full release. In fact, it's even coming out of the next beta. So if you are using that, just know that that's going away. Karen, you haven't tried iPadOS 16, right? Yet?
No, I don't have the beta on my iPad.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So it's good. There's other changes too. I know Stage Manager always kind of gets the, because it is sort of like the big wow moment, and it is what, they spent a lot of time when they announced it back at WWDC really going over it, and it was kind of like the most major feature. But like iPadOS 16, we have a preview of it up right now because it's not fully out. You should go check that out because our writer Brian really outlines sort of like how Stage Manager isn't actually the only change. It's just kind of like the one that gets all the headlines.
Right.
So if you are a little sad about iPadOS 16, I would suggest going to read Brian's preview because it gives you a really good overview of kind of like everything that's going on and doesn't just solely focus on Stage Manager. Obviously, he talks about Stage Manager quite a bit because it is a big feature, but it's really nice to kind of see all the different ways that iPadOS 16 is going to change the way you use your iPad as well. So check that out. Other news, let's talk about the October event, because along with that, we keep hearing rumors of like new products that are supposed to launch this year and stuff. But now it seems Apple's October event might not even happen at all. So according to Mark Gurman, Bloomberg's Mark Gurman, instead, we might actually just have new products being released by press release, which is something that Apple has done in the past. There's been plenty of products that have just been released as press releases. However, it's interesting because, it seems like they were going to launch a decent amount of stuff in October from what we've been hearing so far. Like we're expecting like M2 iPad Pros, so like an 11-inch and a 12.9-inch, presumably. Also, some new MacBook Pros that probably have, what we think might be like the M2 Pro and the M2 Max chips. And then we've even been hearing a lot about, the Mac Pro, which they had already said earlier in the year was the only device they haven't yet upgraded to the M series chips. And we're expecting like M2 Mac Mini, which might even have a variation to have like an M2 Pro or an M2 Max in it as well. Now, I guess it's possible that maybe we aren't getting a Mac Pro. Maybe that's not coming. Maybe that's not ready. Because I feel like a Mac Pro is something that especially a big change to the Mac Pro, if they're really changing it over to Apple Silicon, which I assume that they will, because they kind of teased that they will, it's going to be a pretty big departure from what it was, because it's not going to be, I don't think it's going to be as upgradable, but I don't know for sure, right? Who knows? But it is going to be very different because it's going to be a different sort of setup. So I can't imagine if they go the press release route, I don't imagine they have a Mac Pro that gets launched in just a press release.
I don't know. I feel like if Apple is only announcing new chips, basically, I don't think they need to do a whole event for that. I feel like a press release would suffice to announce new generations with new chips. However, if Apple's going to be announcing a totally new product like the HomePod, because that wouldn't just be an upgrade, that they discontinued the HomePod. So that product is gone. So if they're going to introduce a new HomePod type device, it's going to be something totally different. I think it's not going to look like the previous HomePod. It's not going to just be the HomePod Mini revamped. It's going to be something totally different. So I feel like for something like that, they would do a full event. So I feel like if they just do a press release this time, it's going to be more minor upgrades.
Yeah, and that's the thing. That's what I'm interested in is like, an M2 iPad Pro, if it's literally just changing the processor inside of it, yeah, they can do a press release of that, and they can tell
Right.
you all about how that processor is great in the press release. But if there's nothing else different about it, no design changes, no like hardware changes or big other feature changes, then yeah, I can see them doing that. It's a little interesting that I guess, if you're watching the MacBook Pros, which technically would have sort of new chips, right? Because they'd have the M2 Pro and the M2 Max,
Right.
as we sort of expect. But that's not like it's completely new. We saw them do that with the
Right.
M1. They
Do they
once,
need a slick video to tell
yeah,
us that?
once
I
again, they
just
can just tell us all their tests and their graphs can all just be in the press
Yeah, all the
release.
stats and all the
Yeah,
numbers, all the tech specs, that can all be covered in a press release.
yeah.
Whereas
So,
if there's something completely new, what like if there's a VR, AR headset coming, that's
mhm.
not gonna be a press release.
No, definitely not. That'll be a huge, I think, a very huge, and from what we've been hearing so far too, is that actually might not necessarily launch, but there might be like finally some official information from Apple at an event that they might do in January of 2023.
Yeah, I
Uh,
just feel like they're not gonna Apple isn't going to announce a headset like that until they can have an
mhm,
event with a ton of tech reporters there because they want that headset on tech reporters' heads to
yeah,
get the word out about what it's like. I
totally.
that's there's no way they can do that in a press release. I'm speaking with authority, like I know this, but that's just
Mhm.
my best guess.
Yeah, no, and I would agree with you. I think the headset for sure is like the one product that we were pretty sure is coming down the pipeline. Once again, we don't know; it's all rumors, but it seems like there's a lot of smoke there, and
Right.
which means there's probably fire.
But
And
not next month if they're doing
no, yeah,
just
yeah,
press
not next month
releases.
if they're definitely just doing press releases. But it's interesting because there's still like the things that we think maybe Apple might launch this year still. Like we've talked about the iPads, we've talked about the MacBooks, but like as Karen was mentioning, there has been talk about like kind of um, a revamped HomePod, and like not a HomePod Mini, but like an actual like new sort of HomePod that kind of replaces the discontinued original HomePod. And like you said, Karen, I don't know why they would put that out in a press release unless for some weird reason they're just relaunching the original
Yeah,
HomePod with just a
I just
few.
don't think it's gonna look or be anything like that.
Yeah,
It
and
it if Apple is going to bring back a discontinued product, it's gonna be completely different.
mhm, and yeah, and hilariously enough, like the HomePod, especially for good reason. There's a lot of criticism around kind of what is it, what it does. It's a nice speaker, but like, does it really kind of do everything you want a smart speaker to do? Not necessarily. Um, and I feel like the first HomePod, because it sort of missed the mark a little bit, or at least the
It just
marketing.
didn't do enough for the money, I
Yeah.
think, was it? Nobody I don't remember hearing any complaints that it didn't sound good. I
Mhm.
mean, it was a good speaker, but it just was a lot of money for what it did, and the HomePod Mini sort of hits that sweet spot where maybe it doesn't do quite as much as the HomePod did, but it's a lot cheaper, and
Mhm.
it's so cute and little, and the HomePod
Yeah.
was kind of ugly.
So I
But I feel like there's something completely new coming on the horizon that will maybe combine the HomePod with Apple TV or just something totally different that we haven't even envisioned yet.
Yeah, and I would agree. I would agree that too. Like I think if they're relaunching another HomePod that isn't just like a HomePod mini situation, which very much is just a tiny speaker that you can kind of use Siri with, which I think is, once again, for $99, I actually think is a pretty good price. It's a pretty good speaker for the size that it is. I love
And
mine that I have in my house.
I use mine as a hub for
Yeah.
my smart lights and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, and it's great for that. But yeah, if they're reintroducing like a premium, I guess if you want to call it that, or like a HomePod or something, it's going to need to. They're going to want to expand on why, right? They're going to want to expand on why it's worth what it is, or why it's
Right.
different than other. Why it's different than other.
They're gonna wanna show it in action.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And then uh, we've also like some rare, like very tiny rumors, but we've heard that maybe AirPods Max might get a bit of an upgrade. especially since they just upgraded the AirPods Pro. Perhaps there is
Right,
some,
or maybe just new colors.
yeah, it might just be new colors. Who knows? But that, once again, that's something that they don't definitely could just release in a press release. They've
Oh,
done
for
that. They've
sure,
done that
for
for
sure.
most AirPods. In fact, the AirPods Pro
Yeah.
2 were like the only ones since the original AirPods were announced that actually have had an event release.
Yeah, yeah.
And yeah, and then another thing is like maybe a new Apple TV. We've heard a bit about that. And once again, Apple TV is another one of those products that's kind of like in this
Yeah,
weird
press
place.
release, what I mean, if it's just incremental upgrades,
Yeah.
I think a press release would be plenty.
Yeah, but it's also one of those products where like it feels like, and from some of the stuff, you know, we've heard and seen around, that like perhaps it would be a decent change, like a bigger change than just like, you know, some more memory or a better chip, or it might be something more. And then once again, I think like if Apple TV is going to actually take that next step and become like a more than just a box that has apps on it, which is kind of not all it does, but I kind of always liken it to that, because I feel like there's only so much you can do with the way the Apple TV is currently implemented, which is one of the reasons why it hasn't gotten too many upgrades, except for, you know, it got a second generation 4K model like last year. That didn't really change too much though. And
Right.
it's mostly been the same since its inception. It's just gotten slightly
Right.
better. So if they're going to do something big with that, once again, they would want to, like, I think, really show it off. But
For sure.
but who knows? So I'm interested to see if this is true. I mean, Mark Gurman has decent sources and has a decent record on calling stuff like this.
He does.
But we've also heard so many like other rumors about things that are coming down the pipeline that I am curious if right now maybe, you know, how whoever source is, whether it's Mark Gurman's or Minchi Kuo's or somebody else's, is if they're getting a bit tongue tied or some signals crossed. I'm curious to see what happens. We'll know, I guess, you know, in about 2 weeks. If we haven't heard anything about an event, then it's probably likely maybe not that there wouldn't be. But it's hard to say. And obviously, if products just launch one Monday morning or something like that, then we'll have our answer about that too. So yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I was kind of hoping for an October event, just because, you know, Apple events are fun, at least from a consumer standpoint. They're a little hard when it comes to work, but yeah, I mean, it's always fun to sort of have new stuff to talk about whenever, and events always are just kind of a fun day, a hard but fun day here at iMore. So I was kind of looking forward to an October event, but also there's like a bunch of other stuff happening in the tech world in October. So maybe it'll be nice for us to have a bit of a break if it's just going to be some press releases. So we'll have to see what happens. And speaking of new products, Mark Gurman has also said that a new 15-inch MacBook Air, a new Mac Pro, HomePod, and larger iPad are all coming in 2023. So that's another part to this thing that Mark Gurman's kind of throwing on, is like, well, we've talked about, you know, the Mac Pro and some new and HomePods and stuff like that. We've heard that might come by the end of 2022, and there's still quite a bit of rumors about that. But now Gurman is saying that's not coming to 2023. And those are all the products that we just mentioned would probably be something that Apple would want to launch in an event.
Right.
So yeah, if this is the information that Mark's getting, I can see why he's whether he's been specifically told or if he's doing a little inferring himself. I can definitely see, you know, why that would mean like, oh, I guess maybe there's not going to be an event come October. Because yeah, all those other ones that are just going to be incremental increases really don't need to be on the grand stage. So we'll have to see what happens. Hopefully, I'm curious if they really do have that January event that we've heard about a bit that might be focused on the reality headset. Just because, first of all, they haven't had an event in January too often. They've done it before, but it hasn't usually been, and I can't remember what it was for. I looked this up like 2 weeks ago. I can't remember what it was for, but it was a long time ago. They had an event in January. But it just would be, I don't know, it would be cool. It'd be like kind of a different, from at least the past few years, it'd be a bit of a different thing. And also knowing if it focuses like so heavily on the reality headset, which we've heard a lot about, and I'm really, really interested in. I mean, I'm sure it's going to be really, really expensive, and I don't know if I'm actually going to ever get it, but I'm super interested in to see what Apple is going to do in the space and kind of what they're going to come out with. So yeah, I would say, like, although I'm a little sad that maybe there won't be an October event, it's like I really hope that we hear that there's going to be like a January event at some point. I mean, we wouldn't hear that probably until December or January itself, but I'm sure hoping. Yeah, so moving on to more testing of devices, the Apple Watch Ultra has been also put through some durability tests, and once again, you can go on YouTube and see probably a bunch of this. But in a new video by Sam Cole, the new Apple Watch Ultra and Apple Watch Series 8, he kind of put them through like some durability tests to see what they do. But then he just essentially tries to smash them to bits by the end of the video. He's just trying to break them. And what's crazy is the Apple Watch Ultra like wouldn't break. Like, obviously,
the Series 8 broke right away.
Yeah,
like immediately shattered to bits. But the Apple Watch Ultra did not break.
Yeah, which I think is really, really cool. I think, like, you know, and it's funny because before the Apple Watch Ultra was announced, and, you know, we kept hearing rumors of like a rugged new Apple Watch and all that. We also had seen that Apple had put out all those ads about the Apple Watch Series 7 at the time, which was the best Apple Watch at the time. And they kept putting out those ads about how rugged it was, right?
Yeah.
And then we were kind of like, oh, maybe they aren't going to launch like this new rugged thing.
Well, there's a couple of things. Well, first of all, the Series 8 watch that they smashed was an aluminum and glass version. I always get the stainless steel and sapphire Apple Watches. So I would have been curious to see if he would have compared that as well. Because sapphire and glass are two completely different substances. Sapphire, I believe, is the second hardest only to diamond. So, and sapphire is what they generally use in high-end watches for the face. So it's just like, it's a completely different kind of thing. But in addition, the Apple Watch Ultra also has that lip where the titanium comes up a little bit higher over the screen. So the screen itself is not directly exposed to, you know, anything flat that you bang it against or that you bang against it. So, so it has two things going for it. So I'm just curious if it's more because of the sapphire or more because of that lip that's up around.
Well, and the Apple Watch Ultra also is, you know, it's a titanium case. You know, so it's even, you know, compared to aluminum, it's much, much stronger.
Right. But if you think about like the hammer hitting the screen, like the metal around the Series 8, it's not even coming into play at all. It's the hammer's hitting directly onto the glass.
Yeah.
So, well, what do you expect to happen when you hit a hammer directly onto glass? Whereas with the Ultra, the hammer is going on. Did you watch the video? Did you actually see like how they did the test? And like, I assume the hammer is like going flat onto the watch. So the titanium is protecting the face. So it's not even contacting the hammer probably.
Yeah. And I think obviously the stronger glass, also just even the flat design is going to be, you know, the completely flat glass, even if there wasn't a lip, is going to be much
glass.
But even the flat design is even if it didn't have a lip, would at least be slightly stronger than kind of the domey design of the Series 8. I think when it comes to the aluminum one, I think obviously, you know, if you take a hammer to your Apple Watch, don't do that. It's not good. But I think, you know, that's probably likely the more common one for people to get is probably like the aluminum
by far,
Series 8, right?
Far.
I think not that people don't do it, but I think, you know, the sapphire crystal and the stainless steel aren't as popular, even though they're
definitely not as popular. And for sure, if he was only going to test one, he picked the right one to test. Like you have to pick the aluminum one because it is by far the most popular. But I would have liked to have seen him test all three. I still think even with the sapphire, the stainless steel and the sapphire crystal, it still probably would have broken, but maybe not shattered quite as much as not that it does any good, but I just would have been curious to see the results of the.
Yeah. But it's cool to see somebody like literally take a hammer to the Apple Watch Ultra and see that it pretty much comes out fine, some scratches and stuff, but the display is completely fine. So
again, we don't recommend that you try this at home.
please don't. Let
I mean, this is
YouTubers.
something that should be done in a lab with safety
Yeah.
goggles on and
Yeah.
you know, the whole bit.
Yeah. Let other people do that. And then you can watch it for entertainment purposes.
Yes.
Which is what
Again, not a
we like to
scientific
do.
study, but it is an entertaining
Hmm.
a video for entertainment
Yeah.
purposes.
But I think if people are, if you're really wondering about how durable the Apple Watch Ultra can be, this is at least some display of
Yeah.
kind of what it can do, what it's going to be able to kind of hold up against. And if you're using it as intended, you're not taking an actual hammer to it. You're probably being a lot nicer to it than Sam Cole in the video there. So
Yeah.
I think it's cool to see that it's just how much more durable it was, because that was one thing that I kind of wondered, like, obviously with having a titanium case and the better screen technology and just like the lip and the flatter design, I knew it was obviously going to be more rugged than what we had before in the series. But I did all kind of wonder, like, Apple has said that, like, the Apple Watch Series 7 at the time, and now I guess Series 8, because it's essentially the same watch, is pretty rugged as it is. And I think it is, to a degree, to like normal use and stuff. Obviously,
Right.
this
Banging
is an
against
extreme
doorways
example.
like I do
Yeah.
every day when I'm walking through them.
Yeah. But I did wonder how much more rugged were they actually going to be able to make it. Just because of how rugged the Apple Watch Series 7, at least in terms of just a watch, is. But yeah, this is kind of like even kind of opened my eyes a bit to be like, wow, like they designed this thing to really, really, really like hold up to like extreme temperatures and extreme everything. So
Right, for sure. Another thing I would have liked to seen if they hit it with something that wasn't so flat, like a rock or something pointy,
yeah.
where the titanium lip wouldn't
Mhm.
be an advantage.
Yeah.
Yeah, something that would contact the screen directly.
Yeah, totally. And like we said, this is just one example. I think is a cool example to show you kind of some of the stuff it could do. There are, I'm sure, I haven't looked it up myself, but I'm sure if you looked up like Apple Watch Ultra durability test
Oh,
on
I'm sure
YouTube,
there's a
I'm sure some,
proliferation of
yeah,
examples on
yeah.
YouTube if
And
you
I'm sure there's
care
ones
to find them.
where they actually do break the Ultra somehow, however they do that. I'm sure there are
Oh,
ones where
yeah,
they do.
yeah.
People will find a way to do things if they want to do it for for entertainment purposes or what have
Right,
you.
it's not magic. It can be
Yeah.
broken.
Yeah. So yeah, if you've been wondering about how durable an Apple Watch Ultra actually is, I think when it comes to wearing it on your wrist, you're going to be in a pretty good spot. So don't worry about that too much. All right, let's move on to the iPhone 14 Pro, because even though it's been out for, I guess, 2 weeks now, since it first started coming to people's hands, and people have started to notice it might have a battery life issue. And this is actually something I feel like I'm experiencing, but it's sort of hard to tell. But the iPhone 14 Pro and the 14 Pro Max are supposed to get about 23 hours of battery life. The company Apple says that that includes about 29 hours, or sorry, that's based on video playback. That's how they tend to. That's how they like to sort of quote their battery life, is usually based on like video program. The iPhone, so it's 23 for the 14 Pro, and for the 14 Pro Max it's 29, because it does have a bigger battery since it's a bigger display. However, lots of people seem to be thinking that they're not quite getting everything out of it.
Yeah, I have the 14 Pro, and I've been awake for about 5 hours, and I use my phone a lot, but I'm not using it every minute. I don't have videos going or anything like that. I'm at 78% right now. So if you extrapolate, it probably would get me through about 23 hours, but that's not with constant use. So I know it's a little bit less than I would have hoped, but I don't know. It's not horrible, but I think it could be better.
Yeah, and so Apple hasn't like come out and said anything is like that they've noticed anything's wrong, or like there's a patch coming or anything like that. So we're not really sure, but I've noticed that I don't feel like I'm getting the same battery life out of my 14 Pro that I would expect, especially coming from the 13 Pro, which was like so good on battery life.
Yeah.
And I mean, some of that, I'm much like you, Karen. I haven't been up for that long, so I'm only at like 90% or 95% right now, but I haven't been up that long. Not nowhere near as long as you because I slept in today. But
We're in different time zones too.
yeah, but yeah, it's been I've noticed that when I do use it heavily for like YouTube and social media and things like that, and taking pictures and stuff, I do feel like it's draining a bit more than I
Yeah.
would expect it to. And I don't even have some of those, Apple's even acknowledged that, some features, specifically the haptic feedback on the keyboard that you can enable.
Yeah, I actually
And
turned it off because I think it was draining my battery.
yeah, Apple's admitted that you'll see decreased battery life if you do use that feature, which I mean makes sense. You're using the haptic engine a lot more
Right.
if you're using it to type, and that thing, it's the haptic engine is good. It vibrates quite, it does a lot, right? You've felt it
Yeah,
before
I
when you,
like it. I
yeah.
like it, but it wasn't worth the battery drain for me.
But yeah, so there are a few things you can do if you find you're experiencing the iPhone 14 Pro or your Pro Max, you think that maybe you're not quite getting enough battery out of it. This is just sort of my tips for you are, if you're using the haptic feedback, I would turn that off. I know it's nice. I agree with you, Karen. It really does feel nice, but I turned it off too, just because, like I said, I feel like I'm not super getting quite the battery life I was expecting out of this. Also, you can turn off the always on display. I know that's a crappy thing to do, especially when it's such a nice feature. And, it's kind of one of the hallmark features of the 14 Pro.
Yeah.
But I also kind of think that Apple's always on display, like, as much as I do love it for some things, it's also like a bit of a weird implementation of it.
Yeah.
Because if you've seen other phones, like Android phones and other phones out there, like when they have the always on display, the background will go like completely dark, right? Like it won't just like
Right.
fade, whereas like on the Apple one, like I can still see my full wallpaper and everything,
Yeah.
which isn't
Yeah,
what I
I
really
like
need to see on an always on display. I want to see like the time, I want to see my widgets, and when
yeah.
notification pops up, I want to see like those. But I don't
Yeah,
need to. I don't need to see my. I don't need to see my background the entire time.
yeah, I agree with you. I think maybe Apple should give people the option of like a lower power
Hmm.
always on display where the background is completely black.
Yeah.
I certainly wouldn't mind that. It's really only the widgets that I want to see. I don't need to in the time. I don't need to see the my personal wallpaper.
Yeah. So it's a bit. I mean, I like the always on display. I haven't turned mine off. I don't actually think it uses all that much battery. Um, but
It's like 1 hertz or something like that. I can't
yeah,
use that much,
yeah. But I mean,
but it's
it is battery, right? It is battery that's
yeah,
being
I
used.
probably if I was traveling or something where I didn't have access to a charger, I
Hmm.
probably would turn it off.
Yeah. There is I don't remember how to do it on off the top of my head, but you can find it on our website. We've written about it. There is a way somebody has found out where you can make it essentially a full black screen. But you have to like use the always on display in a focus mode. And
Hmm,
you can set it up in a focus mode, but then it also means that you're in a focus mode the whole time. So
that's weird.
a bit of a
Okay,
give
so
and take, but there is a way to make it so that it does actually like black out the screen, and then you just have like the time and stuff. And
yeah,
to
maybe Apple will come out with an update that will allow people to just make that choice
Yeah, I mean, this is the
offline.
first always on display that they've had on an iPhone, so they're testing out what they think users might like, what they've tested and whatever. And sometimes they get feedback different, and then they'll pivot, or maybe
Yeah,
they won't. Maybe they'll be like, this is how we want to do it, because maybe they have other plans for it. I don't know. We don't
right.
know what's coming down the pipeline. So yeah, my two big things is if you are experiencing some battery drain, or just think your battery's not quite getting it for you, if you have the haptic keyboard turned on, do turn that off. I think you'll notice a decent difference with that. And yeah, you can turn off the always on display. Not that I think that's a huge battery drain, but at the end of the day, if it is on the entire time, and it is taking battery every time it does it, more than it always would.
Yeah. Yeah, and I
Um,
have noticed a difference since I turned off the haptic display. I mean, the
mhm.
haptic feedback,
Yeah.
because there was no way I could have made it through a whole day. with the haptic feedback on.
Yeah, and yeah, I'll be interested to see if Apple does publicly acknowledge this, because there's been like I said, there's been quite a few. It's all, I guess, like, people's personal experiences, but it seems like quite a few people are experiencing some sort of, uh, issues, or just battery life is not kind of what they're sort of expecting. And even one thing to note too, if your iPhone is newer, like new out of the box, like usually it doesn't take too long, but sometimes when it's brand new, it runs a little like hotter, not as in like actual temperature, but I mean hotter as in like just like it's not optimized yet. It like takes
Right.
it takes a little bit for like all phones are like that. It's just kind of like new devices. It takes a little bit to kind of even out.
Okay.
So if it's like brand new, you just got it like maybe a week ago, maybe don't worry about it too much yet. Um, but
And
yeah,
also, the iOS 16 could
mhm,
also be not quite optimized for ideal battery use yet. And with each update, maybe it'll
yeah.
get better.
Yeah, but plenty of people like Sarah Dici, very popular, and lovely
YouTuber.
YouTuber, who does a lot of Apple centric stuff, but also a lot of other things. She posted on Twitter that she was at 22% on her iPhone after about like 3 hours of like pretty heavy use. Um,
Oh, that's not good.
doesn't specifically say she was
From
at
100?
100 though. She
Oh,
doesn't,
okay.
but there's just a screenshot where it shows 22%, and it shows that she's done about 3 hours, but of like really heavy use. Like she's been on
Yeah.
YouTube, she's been using the camera a lot, and she's been on social media a lot in those 3 hours. But uh, and the caption just says "not good." So,
Yeah, yeah.
and
Presumably, she did start pretty close to 100, or she wouldn't have said that. I mean, if she started at 40, she wouldn't say that.
yeah. So, there's plenty of other kind of accounts there, of people saying like, I'm not really getting even a full day out of it, which is weird,
Yeah.
especially since like the iPhone 13 Pro was like so known for having like a great battery life. Like
Right, right. But
uh,
after a year of use, my
mhm,
my 13 Pro, the battery health was down to about 95%, which is pretty typical. I've noticed like the last several iPhones I've had,
yeah,
I've my battery health has been down to about 95% after a year.
mhm,
And yes, when I first got the iPhone 14 Pro, I'm like, the battery doesn't even seem to be as good on
mhm,
this as it was on my year-old 13 Pro. So that
yeah,
was when I turned off the haptic feedback, and that did help a lot.
yeah. So interesting. Well, we'll see if Apple ever comes out and says something specific, or I don't even know if they would. I think honestly, like just as updates roll out, they'll hopefully find, and they might not even talk about them necessarily, but hopefully they'll find some like optimization things that they can
Yeah,
do with iOS 16. Um,
I hope so.
and hopefully, affected users, if you find that you're getting a lot less or it's draining a lot fast, hopefully that'll fix that sort of stuff. Or perhaps Apple will eventually realize that maybe there is something, and they'll find it in the depths of the code somewhere. They'll find that something's going awry, and then I'm sure that they'll say, hey, download this so your battery life's fine, when they put out an update. So we'll have to see how that goes. But in more iPhone 14 Pro news, sports scores come to the dynamic island, which is something that we have heard about, but wasn't in iOS 16 launch. But live activities, um, sort of, as you remember hearing about with iOS 16, where sports scores were going to be able to go on your lock screen as like sort of live activities. If you have a dynamic island, so if you have an iPhone 14 Pro or 14 uh, Pro Max, that stuff's also going to be available in the dynamic island, which I think is a pretty cool use of it. It's another way to sort of use that space of the dynamic island in sort of an interesting way.
Yes, I'm
So
looking forward to my husband being able to do that because there's always some on the weekends, there's always some game that he's following, and so he's
yeah,
constantly, like, tapping around with his phone, like, when we're in the middle of whatever,
yeah.
and it'll be nice for him just to be able to put his phone to the side and just, like, glance over at it occasionally and see, minute by minute, second by second, what's going on with his game.
Yeah, and so if you don't know, the live sports scores are coming with iOS 16.1, which is only in beta right now, so it's not out to the public yet. But that's when live activities are coming with live sports scores. But if you have an iPhone 14 Pro or 14 Max, it's also going to be up in the dynamic island. There's a picture of it. It looks pretty interesting. Just kind of being able to show the score as it updates, which is really, really, really neat. Yeah, you can just like go to the Apple TV app, search for a game, tap follow, and there you go. You'll start having score updates.
It looks very clean in the dynamic island. It's just the team logo and score on one side, and then on the other side, it's the score, and then the other team's score and team logo.
Yeah,
it's like logo, score, and then score, logo.
And as with everything, you should be able to like long press it to get a bit more of a breakdown. It should like pop out much like, you know, music does or wherever there. And then you should be able to press it to actually go to the app, right? To go to the TV app or what have you. So I think it's cool that like, if I'm following a game because I'm like, I can't watch it at home or whatever. And then I can just like have these little updates on my dynamic island. So even if I'm using, you know, I'm in the Photos app or something, or I'm doing something else, I'll be able to kind of keep an eye on the score, which I think is really cool. This is one of the features where I'm really interested to see how it gets implemented into some of the sports apps that I use, because a lot of the sports apps I use are just like third-party apps, which I know like live activities there is an API for that, so developers can, you know, take advantage of that. And so I'm interested to see what they'll do and how that works. And as far as I know, from what I understand, they'll also be able to put it up in the dynamic island if they so choose, not just on the lock screen. So I'm really interested to see with that. There's the score app is usually what I use for like keeping an eye on games to score, scores of games that I'm like trying to follow. I don't follow a lot of sports, mostly hockey, which is starting up soon, so I'm excited for that. I'm really interested to see what that how it'll kind of work and see what kind of third-party apps and stuff will sort of adopt this. I'm hoping most of them will, and I think the big ones probably will. Like Score's a really big app. I'm sure people have heard of it, and I'm excited to see what they'll do, because they're in my opinion, hilariously enough, they're like more on top of getting scores updated than even like the official like NHL app is. It's like the NHL app is always, I find, like legs behind my Score app, which is why I usually use Score app for everything. So yeah, I'm excited to be able to like put this on my dynamic island or put it on my lock screen. And that way, if I'm out or something, I can just quickly look over with the always on display, see that the score changed, be like, oh, okay, cool. If I want to look into it, I can tap into it. Yeah, I'm really excited for this. So it's cool that we're starting to see that. We know that it's coming out in iOS 16.1 whenever that launches officially to everyone. Hopefully, probably in a few weeks. I would assume it's already in beta. It's already in like its third beta for the iOS. So I'm assuming it wouldn't be too much longer, but it all depends on what Apple thinks they need to do, what features they want to add or need to optimize or what have you. So we'll see when that comes out. But if you're looking forward to that, it is likely coming sooner rather than later. Yes. So the interesting thing, let's talk about AirPods Pro, because as everyone knows, AirPods Pro 2 came out, and we have a full, very extensive review done by our editor-in-chief, Gerald, up on the website, and it's very good. And he goes very in depth into a lot of, features, even how they sound. He has a sound test that he kind of does. He uses certain tracks that he knows to track to sort of like hear certain sounds and what he thinks of them. And he gave it a 4.5. He says that they're the best in-ear buds for iPhone users, of course, which, isn't maybe that dramatic of a statement, but the fact that they do seem to actually be quite a bit better when you actually hear them and use them than the original AirPods is nice to hear, because the original AirPods Pro rather. It's nice to hear. I think I haven't personally used them yet, and I'm not a big fan of the Pros, only not because they're not good, but just because I'm not a big fan of like ear tips. They just like kind of hurt.
That sort of underwater
ears.
Feeling.
Yeah, they sort of hurt my ears, and they're not my favorite. So I just stick with like regular old AirPods, and if I want something more intense, I use like an over the ear sort of situation. That's my preferred preference. But I've tried AirPods Pro, the first ones, and I was always impressed with like transparency mode. And I always thought that the ANC was pretty awesome for a pair of earbuds.
Yeah, apparently they're much better. The ANC is much better now. So
yeah, and apparently the transparency mode, the adaptive transparency, that's on the AirPods Pro 2, works really, really well. Gerald said he's been really, really happy with it, which is cool.
yeah, and they brought the adaptive transparency to the original AirPods.
Yeah,
which is very cool.
Yeah, that was something that also happened this week, kind of a bit of a surprise for AirPods Pro users. If you have the original AirPods Pro, you can actually get the adaptive transfer feature. It has now come out. If you haven't updated your firmware or your firmware yet, maybe do that. Oh no, I'm sorry. Don't listen to me. It was in the latest developer beta of the iOS 16.1, so it's not actually quite out yet for everybody. But
it's coming.
Yeah, it's coming, which I think once again is awesome. Like, there's Apple definitely could have just kept this on the AirPods Pro 2, and it could have just been,
right. I think that's what everyone expected.
Yeah. But the fact that they're bringing it down, I think is going to help. I think I've heard some people say that their original AirPod Pros have kind of like over time, the ANC has gotten like or transparency mode has gotten like a little worse. So maybe this will help with that. I've also heard, this is just stuff I've looked into. I don't actually have like any hands-on knowledge, so don't take this as the word of God or anything. But like, you can get used to transparency, like your ears can kind of get used to it, and it doesn't quite feel as effective. And same with ANC. Apparently, ANC, like your body and your mind can kind of like get used to it to the point where like some of the noises that do make it through, like, because it can't cancel everything, big loud bangs or whatever. You at the beginning, like when you first start using it, you might not notice as much as when your body's kind of used to how it feels when you're using it. I don't know how true that is. That's just some stuff that I looked up when I heard about this earlier this week. But adaptive transparency from everything we know, and especially with Gerald, what Gerald said in his review is that it's really good. He's happy that it's there. So I think like having that come down the lineup down to like the older AirPods Pro, I think is really good. I think that, good on Apple for releasing a feature that they didn't really have to. I think they probably just could have kept it and been fine. I find interesting with the lanyard hook that
Holes.
like, yeah, does Apple even sell a lanyard? I don't think that they do, right?
I
Maybe
don't
I'm wrong.
think so.
That was one thing that I thought was super surprising when they announced it, because I totally expected them to be like, oh yeah, and like here you can buy the lanyard, the Apple lanyard or whatever, and it was probably going to be like too expensive for a piece of string, I'm sure. But then they didn't, and they were just like, other people can figure that out, which is fine.
There are plenty of lanyards out there. It's an easy product to find, but it is funny that Apple didn't come out with its own. You'd think Apple would. It's an opportunity to make some money.
Yeah, and like, and regardless of how expensive regardless of how expensive it was, there would be people who would be buying it, right? They would just order their lanyard at the same time that they ordered their AirPods Pro and just be done with it. But yeah, I thought that was interesting. Okay, Apple they do sell some, but I don't believe they're designed by Apple. I think they're in case. It looks like the in case lanyard is something you can get. But you can get that on the Apple website, but I don't think it's designed by Apple. I think it is.
Apple's done that before, where they don't come out with an accessory, and instead they just promote a third party one, like with the Belkin AirTag.
Yeah, Belkins they have a lot of
accessories, for example.
Yeah, they have a couple of manufacturers that they work with that are kind of like official Apple third party ones, and so it looks like for lanyards it's going to be in case. So they do sell some. I guess you can if you're going to order, you can,
but it's not going to say Apple on it.
Yeah, it won't be pure white, which is what I assumed that they would be if they were to to launch
Oh,
them.
they probably just get dirty if they were pure white anyway.
Yeah, that's true. They would probably get really gross. But yeah, Karen, I can't remember. Do you have AirPods Pro or no?
I do not. I have AirPods too.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So
I'm like you. I don't like the feeling of the
mhm.
AirPods Pro in my ear. It's like too much of a feeling of fullness. It feels like cabin pressure underwater. I just don't like that feeling. I just prefer the way that regular AirPods just kind of sit in the ears.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
don't need active noise cancellation. I don't commute on a noisy train.
Mhm.
I can't think of a situation where I would ever need active noise cancellation. I don't work in coffee shops generally.
Yeah. And
It's
Gerald,
not a feature I wanna pay for.
yeah, to put it in perspective, Gerald does have commute when he goes into the office uh, out there in London into the future offices. He does take the tube or the underground,
Yeah, and
and
it's very loud.
yeah, and he said that like it really cuts like everything out pretty much his like entire ride. He's just like in peace,
Yeah,
which is
he's the
nice.
perfect person to test that feature.
Yeah, because like
Of all of us at iMore, I think he might be the only one who has a noisy commute like that.
yeah, so it's good. I mean, obviously, there's still that 249 price point. It's nice that it didn't go up, but it's still a chunk of change if you're looking into it. Um, and obviously they still are very Apple focused. So if you're someone who doesn't use Apple, they aren't going to be quite as great for you. They're kind of going to be more middling, I suppose, if you're going to be like using them on an
Yeah, I
Android or
mean, the
some other
reason to
phone.
buy
But
AirPods Pro is because you're an Apple user and you wanna
mhm,
take advantage of the easy compatibility with the entire Apple ecosystem.
yeah,
Because there of course, there are better earbuds out there where you can get more better sound for your money, more features for your money.
yeah, totally. And they can also take advantage of spatial audio, which we all sort of expected, but they have
Right.
spatial audio, which you can also personalize in iOS 16. Do the personalized spatial audio, which you can do on other AirPods as well. You can do it on the regular AirPods 3
AirPods, right, yeah.
and the original AirPods Pro as well. But that's something that's available to you. And the battery life is a bit better, which I think is probably the thing that was the uh, probably like the biggest deterrent to the AirPods Pro was like that 4.5 battery life that the
Uh-huh.
original Pro has. Is like that can be a little short.
Sure.
I mean, you can charge them up pretty quick. Like they have quick charging and stuff, and you can extend the life pretty easily. But that is a bit short. But now they offer 6 hours per charge on the buds, which I think is a much.
That's a nice jump.
Yeah, that's the same. That's the same that the AirPods 3 get, but they're also not using ANC. So
Yeah,
um,
ANC does take a lot of battery power.
yeah, because it's 6 hours. Their Apple rates it for 6 hours with ANC on, which I think is
Okay.
pretty decent. And then you also get 30 hours battery life stored in the case rather than just 24. So it actually can overall last you longer in the long term and in the short term, which I think is a great like quality of life update to the product.
Yeah, for sure.
Before we go out, Karen, because we're talking about AirPods Pro, let's give some recommendations to the folks. What's an audio recommendation you can have? That can be anything. It can be anything you listen to. So a movie, a podcast,
Yeah.
music, and plug some stuff. Plug some of your favorite stuff.
Well, as I've talked about and written about many times, I'm a huge fan of the show For All Mankind,
Mhm.
and they actually have an official podcast, and the host is one of the stars of the show. Her name is Chris Marshall, and she plays the astronaut Danielle Poole. And every week she has different guests, and the guests are the other stars of the show, the showrunners. It's really just a neat behind the scenes. They talk about what it was, how they shot different scenes, and how they do some of the special effects, and as actors, how they prepare for certain scenes, and the showrunners will talk about how they how they came up with certain things. It's a very cool behind the scenes look at the show. So that's a fun listen, particularly during the season, because you can listen to it right after you watch the show.
Mhm. Nice.
How about you?
I'll give an album recommendation from a band that I really really like. The band's called the Yeah Yeah Yeahs. Uh, if you haven't heard of them, you may have heard of their song Maps. It was in Rock Band forever ago when that was, a big thing.
Sing a few bars for us, Luke.
What?
Sing a few bars for us.
No, I won't do that. Not because YouTube would have anything to say about that. No, but also I am not a singer. You do not want me to sing. But it's their first album in like 9 years. They kind of sort of took like an unofficial break. Like they've been touring and stuff, but they haven't really put out a lot of newer music. And yeah, it kind of goes back to some of their more earlier kind of like more electrifying kind of stuff. But like also kind of makes room for a bit of a new sound. And it's just really interesting. I think like in general, it's just like a good kind of like indie rock album. If that's at all some stuff that you're into, I would highly suggest checking out the Yayaya's new Cool It Down. I think it's really good. I've been listening to it with my AirPods 3 and it's been great. So it's kind of like the album I have. I'm one of those people who like, I get obsessed with, songs or albums or whatever. And I'll put them heavily on repeat for a while. And then they'll fade away. And then I just kind of listen to them every now and then. But right now it's been on my heavy rotation. The Yayaya's Cool It Down. So that's my recommendation. If you're looking for some good indie rock, and they're also Canadian, so that's nice. But cool. If you're looking for some good indie rock, go check that out. And that's our show. Thank you so much for listening to us. If you've been following along live, we appreciate you so much. Thanks for coming out. We record the podcast live every Friday at 11 a.m. Eastern on YouTube, so you can see us in full glory if you want to interact with us at all. We love all the comments and everything, so keep those coming. If you are listening to us in your podcatcher of choice, thank you so much. Which, by the way, quick note on that, we're now on Spotify. We weren't on Spotify before. We are now on Spotify. Search up the iMore Show on Spotify if you want to. If that's your preferred podcast app and maybe you've been using a different one to listen to us, you can now find us on Spotify. So please check that out. And thank you so much for listening along. As always, thank you to Jim Metzendorf, our audio editor, who always makes us sound so good. And until next time, you know what? You can hit Karen and I up and Steven at our Twitter handles. If you want to ask us any questions, ask us stuff about the show. If you want us to talk about anything, come next week or whatever. So you can hit me up at Luke Filipowicz and at Karen. Where can they hit you?
Karen S. Freeman.
Yeah. So they're up on the screen now. They're also going to be in the show notes. So will Steven. Steven's he's not here today, but Steven's obviously a great part of the show. So make sure if you want to have any questions for him, you can go ahead and holler at him as well. But yeah, hit us up on Twitter and let us know what you think and what you want us to talk about next. But until next week, we will say adieu.
Bye.